Ever wonder about starting in real estate, but you've almost no money? Well, meet Kevin. He's an immigrant to the US with $0. By his early 20s, was worth millions with just a few simple single-family homes he slowly bought to live in, fix up, rent out, using the knowledge and experience he gained as a real estate agent. And you don't even need a degree. Look, I love Meet Kevin's tips. They're safe, they're legal, they're smart, but it's just one little thing, one little small thing. Added that one little tip, it would be like rocket fuel to a sound strategy. So in this video, I'll explain what Kevin gets right, one area he could improve upon, and how you could benefit. And if you're wondering if real estate can be for you, this may very well be the video that inspires you. So Meet Kevin really gets a lot of stuff right. Right from his early OG real estate videos, the big takeaway that I took was just like the Nike sign says, but here it's an investment, it's just invest. You've got to start. And that is the encouragement, the inspiration that Meet Kevin provides. I really appreciated that. A lot of other people probably appreciate that too. You don't need a big down payment. This came as a shock to me. You can have a low down payment and that lowers the barriers to entry. Let's say you're thinking about buying a $400,000 house. Instead of having to come up with 20% or 80,000, maybe just come up with 3% or 12,000. Going from 12,000 to 80,000 is a massive difference. And you might even get it in for lower. If you're a veteran, for instance, with a VA loan, you don't have to put any money down, but you could also put down a little bit more, like 5%, whatever you're comfortable with. But the main thing is that the barriers to entry are lower than you think. A thing that Kevin really drives home is this idea, it's a very clever idea in real estate investing, is the idea of purchasing a home that needs a little bit of TLC or love and attention, what's known as a fixer-upper. It's a value add proposition. Look, you find a home that is maybe not brand new and really there's a lot of cosmetic work that really could enhance the property. So maybe it's paint, countertops, carpets, these kind of things. And it's something that doesn't appeal to your typical mom and dad. They look at it and go, oh, this is disgusting. You know, there's a lot of work to be done here, cosmetic. Typically, a house that looks perfectly renovated will sell a lot higher than a property that does not look brand new. That needs a lot of attention, that needs a lot of work. So by buying a house that is in need of some cosmetic care, you can usually buy these houses significantly cheaper than a house that is looking like it's move-in ready right now and it's absolutely beautiful, because people are willing to pay a premium for that move-in ready house. So this is a big value added. When you come along and let's say that $400,000 house, you've bought it, but maybe it would be worth closer to $500,000 if it was actually fully done up. So that $400,000 house, you've come in with a 3%, you put it down, that's great, you put down $12,000 and now you're into that house. And maybe you might want to invest about $30,000 into the property, and that'll help with, let's say you're doing your painting, you do some new carpets, you change that avocado or pink bathroom into something more modern, maybe you glaze the tiles, you put in new countertops, new faucets, some hardware like doorknobs, etc., maybe some new blinds. You just make it look like it's going to pop, something that looks much nicer, much more new, much more fresh, something that people would desire in the 21st century. Okay, nothing like your great-grandmother or grandfather's stuff. It's almost the BRRR, the BRRRR strategy is what he's suggesting. You're essentially buying, renovating, renting out, and then rehabbing. So Kevin's idea is that you buy a place to live in, and when you live there for at least a year, then you could consider renting it out. So you essentially are forcing the appreciation. So even if the market is flat, and you buy this house for, let's say, $400,000, you put 3% down, that's only $12,000. Now you're going to invest $30,000 extra in terms of renovation. You then go back to your mortgage company and you ask them to take a look and to reevaluate the mortgage and just see if you still have to pay the PMI, right? Because you don't really need the mortgage insurance if you actually have an equity of 20% or more, typically speaking. You can get rid of that PMI, and that's what usually scares a lot of people from not wanting to put in less than 20% because they think, oh, if I put less than 20%, I'm going to be stuck with PMI, for the next 30 years, something like that. So again, if you have a regular loan, regular mortgage, and you put a low down payment down, like 3%, 5%, 10%, whatever you're allowed, as soon as you get it over 20% and you reapply, you will actually no longer have to pay the PMI. So what you have done by buying a house like a fixer-upper is you've essentially put down, let's say in this case, 12,000. Then you've invested 30,000 in terms of renovating the property, right? Because that's just the headache some don't want to do. Now you go along to your mortgage company, ask for an appraisal or a reappraisal. The appraisal team come out and the appraiser says to you, well, yeah, you bought it for 400,000, but in this market, given that I've seen the property and I see what you've done with it, it's now actually worth 470,000. So they've reappraised your new value is actually 470, and that's what they think that your house would sell for right now if it was on the market. So you've just gained from 400 to 470,000. Now, of course, you put your $30,000 in, but your profit is 40,000, and you don't pay any tax on that profit because it's unrealized. You're not selling it right now, so you're not going to have to realize that. But it gets better because you now own more. You own your 12,000 that you had a down payment. You own this extra 70,000 from 400 to 470 that's being reappraised. So that's 82,000. And you probably own more if you've been paying your mortgage and it's been a few months, right, with the principal paydowns. But hold a second. You now own more than 82,000. You only put down 3% of the property's value, or 12,000. As soon as you own 80,000 or 20%, you no longer have to pay PMI. But you just got the reappraisal came in and it was worth that extra amount. So it went from 400 to 470, and now you own the 12,000 plus that extra 70, which is 82,000. You just crossed your threshold. You can then ask the mortgage company to please remove the PMI. Okay, you got to check with your mortgage company specifically, but this is a great thing that Kevin suggests. And then you might decide that, you know what, I've been living here for a year. I no longer want to live here. I want to live somewhere else. You can then rent that property out after the end of the year, and it's fully legit. So this is a great lesson that Kevin talks about, and this is really at the gist of what he teaches. And that's great. I mean, I love the motivation, the fact that you can get into a property when you don't really have much money, the fact that he gives you the blueprint of what worked for him and what worked for lots of his clients, buying simple, single-family properties. Not talking about big, lots of doors, complicated financing, large multifamily apartment buildings or anything very complicated, just your simple, run-of-the-mill, single-family homes, or detached homes, as we say back in my home country of Ireland. But one thing that Kevin neglects completely, and it's just this one little thing, and it's great that he does because, he doesn't have the experience in this one area, and that's why it's good that he's not speaking on something that he doesn't have much experience with, which is Kevin neglects short-term rentals completely. And he says that, short-term rental is a job. It doesn't have to be. Okay, short-term rentals do not have to be jobs. You can automate a lot of the work through cleaners you employ to clean the properties, maintenance people. You're probably not going to be, unless you're specialist, you're probably not going to be doing plumbing. You're probably not going to be doing issues like electrical, things like this. So you can hire maintenance, you can hire cleaners, and you can automate even the management. It could be that you have virtual assistants, like for a front desk, or it could be that you actually get property managers, even co-hosts. There's a whole bunch of ways of automating on the personnel side. And also too, on the tech side. I mean, you might be worried about giving keys, so, get an electronic door lock that automatically sends the new guests codes, and they only last for when the guest stays. You might use a non-invasive technology like Google Nest thermostats to make sure that the temperature is right, and to make sure that the settings are there. Maybe you get non-invasive technology like minute systems that, they They record things like the decibel levels so that you know if it goes over a certain threshold, that's for a long time, that's probably a party, right, going on. It's not recording the audio, it's not invasive, as long as it's not currently within, let's say, a bedroom or something like that. As long as it's in the main part of the house, you're totally fine. Got to watch what's happening with Airbnb. They do change the rules quite a lot. There's a lot of technology that you can use, as well as personnel that goes into this. So it can be automated. It does not have to be a job. I could say the same thing about long-term rental. I could say, well, long-term rental could be a job, right? You could, it's not, you're just swapping problems. So when you're doing your research stage of purchasing a property, you still need to do your numbers like as if it's going to be long-term rental. So you want to have conservative numbers, conservative estimates, conservative inputs for your revenue and vacancies as if it's a long-term rental, but at least be open to the possibility of short-term rental. Because with the long-term rental, you're locking in a very low revenue stream. Now that's great. It's fairly consistent, although you can get vacancies, and if it's a single family, it's a vacancy of one, that's it, you're gone, right? It's like 100% unoccupied because it's only one unit. But at least be open to short-term rentals, because the upside risk, like what you can make on the upside, is substantial. You could make 1.3, 2, all the way to 3 times, like 3x the actual rent, or even outside that range. That's just my experience from what I've done, but you could make a lot more with the short-term rentals. It's good that Kevin doesn't talk about this, what he's not experienced with. And look, I admit that there are certain legal issues, let's say with your local area, whether it's a city, a borough, a township, a county, etc., a country even. There can be legal issues, so you have to look into that. But at the same time, guys, you have legal issues with the long-term rental. So in my case, when I started with real estate, I was too scared to even purchase a house. So I engaged in what was known as rental arbitrage, which was I persuaded landlords to rent out to me long-term as if I was a tenant with a lease addendum that allowed me to then short-term rent it as a business. So by doing that, I didn't have to worry about the roof or the plumbing or the major systems in the house. The landlord had to worry about the major systems in the house. So I didn't have to expose myself to the risk of home ownership, but I got to tap in. And then when I purchased my first property, it was like putting my feet further into the water. At the same time, I really was too scared to go into long-term rental because I heard a lot of the horror stories in long-term rentals, because with long-term rentals, they have more legal issues in the sense that the long-term renters, generally speaking, have more legal rights than, let's say, short-term renters. With short-term renters, it's typically innkeepers' rights, whereas long-term renters very, very different. So you have to watch the two. Now, with the long-term rentals as well, look, if you don't get the best of tenants, they can park a car and they can leave the car with no tires on bricks, and it's an eyesore for the community. And you're stuck with a long tenant throughout their lease in the most cases. Whereas with a short-term rental person, if there's one, maybe two of these short-term folks or guests that are there across the course of a year, they're only there for a few days, then they're gone. And that's great. So you're just swapping. From my perspective, maybe it's a little different than Kevin's, and I 100% think he's great on all these issues. But just again, it's just speaking from my experience. You're just swapping one set of issues for another set of issues. That's really it. You're swapping certain legal issues that you might get with the long term, but people leave, you see. So you're maybe just swapping maybe the use of the property as a short-term rental, the legal, etc., in the local municipalities, etc., and noise issues and things like this. Short-term tenants, short-term guests doing whatever they want to do. You're just swapping that for long-term. Yes, there's pros and cons of both sides. Again, what I would say is there's just different solutions as well. There are solutions. It does not have to be a job. You don't necessarily, you can filter your guests. Maybe it's a minimum, it's a minimum age requirement, or maybe it's you can't rent to students, or maybe it's, well, you'd only rent to people that have a certain number of ratings, or they've got at least some reviews, etc., on the short-term rental side. And it's totally legal to do this. So maybe you ask them some questions to try to gauge, like, does this sound like someone that's going to be having a party? They want to rent it, but they're not going to be the ones that are staying. Are they, like what's the composition look like? What is their previous reviews look like? These kind of things. So you can vet. Similarly, it's just different. You're not looking at credit reports. You're looking at, it's a completely different, it's like speaking a different language. But guys, you're just swapping one thing for another. So, I would suggest that, if you haven't already and you're thinking of short-term rentals, I would suggest like checking someone out like Sean Rockydich, who is the equivalent top-rated short-term rental Airbnb YouTuber. He inspired me, and I'm very grateful for what lessons I learned from Sean Rockydich. To a certain, maybe somewhat lesser extent, when I initially started, I was listening to Brian Page, but Sean Rockydich would be the equivalent huge person on YouTube that you really can learn a huge amount from about the short-term rental. Now, if you're looking for a mix between long-term and short-term, like someone who owns the properties but rents them out short-term, you might have someone like Sean Ray, one of Sean Rockadych's friends, Sean Ray. He's also great. Like, he's maybe not as prolific and he's not everywhere on YouTube like Sean Rockydich, but he's really a great mix. I think he'd be an excellent example. So that's where I'm closer to Sean Ray. I'm kind of the mix between Sean Rockydich and Meet Kevin. That's how I would kind of view myself, as a mix between, I want to own a lot of the properties, and then if I can rent them short term, that's great. So, it took me a while to get into long-term rentals, and now that I'm doing long-term rentals, it's also very good. It was the last thing I had to release my brakes. By the way, Release My Brakes is a great book. I highly recommend it too. If you're interested in reading some good thought-provoking subjects, Release Your Brakes is excellent. So how could you benefit from all of this? Well, look, I think the perfect combination is to mix Meet Kevin with his ownership, his long-term rental, his, buying with low down payments, finding a property that needs a little bit of TLC so that you can get that value add from a fixer-upper, or what he calls the wedge deal. Mixing that, Meet Kevin, with someone like Sean Rockydich, that is the super perfect combination right there. You've really incredible from both the long-term and the short-term. Probably, right, their baby or the person they had is probably Sean Ray. Now Sean owns his properties, and he talks about short-term renting, because that's what he typically did historically, was buying the properties and then renting them out short-term. And he's a good friend of Sean Rockydich. Now, I've been trying to get Kevin and Sean to collab for a while, and I'm playing to the YouTube gods that one day they will. But with Sean Rockydich, this guy has been producing so much free content on short-term rental. He's just absolutely blazing through. He's, $1 million renter for years now, and of Airbnb Automated, the old channel that he had. It was just incredibly generous with his information, and I have benefited hugely. I've taken his courses. I've also listened to him for free. I've probably watched all the videos up to the last 2 or 3 years. Now, Meet Kevin, same thing. Huge amount of great content, great courses. I've taken his courses. I've watched his content for years now, for multiple years. So having that perfect combination would really be beneficial if you're thinking about doing real estate and you don't have any money and you just want to start somewhere and you just want to know, how can I do it? These guys, literally rags to riches in both cases. Sean Rockydich and Kevin. So, another thing you can do if you're really trying to add rocket fuel to your investment career is, if you want more personal finance and investing topics, you can subscribe to this channel. I do appreciate it, guys. It really helps the algorithm too. So thanks so much. And moving back into the numbers, when you're doing your research and you're at that stage of assessing, which property to buy, use the conservative long-term numbers as if that's all you can do. Don't use your short-term, pie-in-the-sky optimistic numbers when you're doing your estimates, let's say, of revenue. Yes, you might be vacant with the single-family homes and it's 100% vacant, but also look at what would you expect to earn. So when you're looking at your mortgage calculations, if you're what they call the TIMRD and these kind of things, and what you expect to spend, check the long-term rental. Do not use the short-term rental numbers. The short-term rental, though, it's a good idea to do as a secondary study, just because you might want to consider, could this property also be a good short-term rental? Because let's say, for instance, if you buy a home and it's not necessarily very near to any public transportation, well, you might have an issue because a lot of short-term renters are flying in. They're tourists. They may not have a rental car. There might be certain age groups that might be taking public transport. So, something like that. Of course, different if you're in the mountains or you're in a resort area, but just doing your numbers and your analysis also for the short term. Again, use the long-term numbers when you're thinking about your mortgage, but maybe just consider, okay, what could I make potentially on the upside if I decide to make this into a short term? Of course, make sure it's legal, check out what the laws are in your area. But the take home is that the short-term rental does not have to be a job. Look, it can be, but it doesn't have to be if you hire the right team. Because look, long-term rental can be a job too. I mean, you still got the issues with trying to find the right tenants, trying to maintain the property, if you have property managers, trying to oversee the property managers, right? There's still some work in the long term. The short term is just like maybe a bit more of a risky but higher potential of return investment than long term. But you can still always fall back to long term, hopefully, if you've done your right numbers in investing in the research stage. You can fall back to long term. So you should not be trying to take out mortgages based on the short term potential huge income that you could make. Because again, it could just get banned in your area. You could get closed down, get shut down. So you got to watch that too. But you really are just swapping long term rental issues for short term rental issues. But the upside risk is so much higher. And I love upside risk, and so should you. It's not risk that matters, it's downside risk that matters. Upside risk is the risk that your thing will go up in value, which is good unless you're talking about options. That's a topic for another video. So check out short-term rentals. It's something that if you're just watching Meet Kevin, you need to open your mind a little bit to the short-term side. I think it would be great if someone like Sean Rockydich, who's a huge following, and Meet Kevin, if they were doing a collab, because the two groups, that's the perfect combination. And again, the example will be Sean Ray. So thanks so much, you guys. And if this video is meaningful to you and you like more information, please consider sharing it with other people that you know that may help them too. Guys, Kevin is the GOAT. I mean, he's, in terms of real estate, he's right up there with like bigger pockets. Like take your pick, whether it's Dave Ramsey, whether it's Paula Pant, whether it's Grant Cardone for multifamily, whatever it is. He is fantastic with his OG videos on real estate, on how to start from nothing, how to renovate, how to rent, being able to come in cheap and being able to improve and increase the value. He lays out the blueprints with extreme resolution, unlike almost anybody else. And look, I was you. I wasn't even aware of what I did not know. And Kevin, he changed all that. So I'm eternally grateful to him. His advice literally changed my life. And if you'll hear him out, it's my hope that it changes yours too. And of course, it's the goal of my channel too, so that we can all learn, sharing free financial perspectives to as broad an audience as possible, so that we can all become financially free, so that we can all become the investing professor.